In this section, we're going to introduce Java's implementation of variable length parameter lists. Now, that name maybe doesn't make that much sense right now, but let's go ahead and actually jump into a coding example to show you why we would want such a thing and what exactly it is. So let's consider the idea of writing a method that can compute the average of some numbers. And let's say we're just going to compute the average of two numbers. Well, that's pretty straightforward. So let's type that up really quick. Public static average, let's call this int a1, int a2. And then inside this method we can do something like this. We can do return a1 plus a2 divided by 2. And I need my parentheses in here too, right? Otherwise it's not going to work right. And over here, right, maybe I do a quick display here and I display the average of, let's say, 5 and 10. Compile this. Looks like I have a typo somewhere. I forgot my return type in the average method. Let me put that in. Public static double. Now let me go back, compile this, run this, and I got back 7.0. So that is a little bit off. It should be 7.5. Over here, what I need to do is I need to do some casting. So let me make sure this is a floating point operation. Compile this, run this. 7.5. So that looks good. But suppose for a moment that I want to average three numbers. So let me copy this line, go over here, type in, I don't know, let's do 90. Compile this, and of course it doesn't compile because Java can't find a version of the average method that applies to three parameters. And I could try to fix this the bad way, right? I could create a copy of that method, add in another parameter. Int a3, add in over here, plus a3, divide by 3. And I could compile this and it would work. But the issue is I need to have one method for each kind of combination or number of numbers that I'm trying to average, right? So I have one for 2, I have one for 3. I would also need to make one for 4 numbers, 5 numbers, 6 numbers. And that's just kind of ridiculous. So how can we fix this? Well, what we can do is think about writing a method that has this so-called variable length parameter. So let's comment out this code really quick, and let's see if we can write one method that'll compute the answer for both of those. So over here, instead of doing that stuff, this is what I'll write, right? So I'm going to do my public static double. So this is still the same syntax we had original, but here, this is where things are going to change. What I want to do is I want to tell Java, for whatever number of ints you give to this method average, take them all, doesn't matter how many there are, package them together into an array of ints. And I can do that. So what I'll write is this. Int dot 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 numbers. So this method here, let me make a couple notes here. Okay. Inside of this method, the numbers name, right, will be an array of integers variable, right? So this isn't just an int, this is an array of integers. Over here, this parameter list, basically what it's saying is, you can take any number of integers and I'll repackage them into an array, and that array will be called numbers inside of my method. So this is a very handy thing that we could have, right? Because if I were to run this program right now, the way it would work is that when we get to this line here, average of 2, 5, when this method is called, it would repackage that 5 and that's 10 into an array called numbers that has 2 elements. When it gets to this line, it would repackage that 5, 10, and 90 into an array called numbers that has 3 elements, the 5, 10, and 90. So I can call that method with any number of arguments, as long as they're all integers, and they'll be packaged together. Given that I have that, I can rewrite this method using kind of the array notation, right? So in this case, let me see. So we'll create something called int sum, and we'll set that equal to 0. And then inside, what we'll do is we'll have a loop, and that loop will reach inside that numbers variable and get out each number. Once we have each number, we can add it into the sum variable, right? So we're just going to accumulate those values in here. And then at the very end, we can do return sum divided by numbers dot length. And over here, I'm going to actually cast this to be a float just so we get kind of our nice division that has all our detail in it. Let's go ahead and try running this. Compiles fine. And here we go. 7.5, 35.0. So this one method has replaced both of these methods we wrote earlier. And I could even take this further. I could create a new line and maybe have a few new numbers. And if I were to take this and run it, it'll still give me a result. So this time it's giving me 24.6 as the average of those 5 numbers there. So for any number of inputs, right, it's always going to take those and package those into an array, right, an array of ints, and that array can then be run in the rest of my program, right? I can use it to actually compute that average. One thing we might worry about, though, is what happens if average is called without any parameters. So let's compile this, run it, and we get an error here. There's something over here that says NaN, not a number. It didn't crash, it just gave us one bad value. Well, kind of, this is maybe an aside, but we have to be careful, right? This is an average method. Averages, though, we have to divide at the end, right, by 0, right? Well, if I have this line here, even though I don't have any numbers to repackage, Java is still going to create a numbers variable, right? It's just so happens that that numbers variable is going to be an empty array, right? So numbers.length is going to be equal to 0, right? That's what happens when we have a variable length parameter, but we don't give it any parameters. In order to fix that, what we'll do is we'll add an extra if statement here. So we'll go if numbers.length not equal 0, then do this stuff, right? So we'll make our code a little bit safer here. And otherwise, we just want to go and return 0, right? So if we didn't find any elements there, we'll just say the average of that is 0. Compile this. Close that off. And now if we compile this and run it, we'll get 0, 7.5, 35, 24.6. All right, so this is a method, right, that we said we set it up so that instead of having, oh, it's one number, 2 numbers being averaged, it'll take whatever it is and package it all up together. A couple of kind of notes here. First of all, you can have other parameters here. You can have, for example, a string. Let's call this string temp, and we'll maybe put it in over here as well too. You can do this. This will compile and work just fine. So if you want to have multiple other parameters to your method, you're welcome. So if you want to include other methods, if you want to include other parameters in your method, that's fine. You just have to make sure you put it ahead of your actual resizing one, right? The key thing here is that this must be last, right? So our variable length parameter must be the last thing in our method definition. And then also, there can only be one of them, right? We can't have, another int here, right? This won't work, right? Java doesn't know what integers you want repackaged into this array or this array, right? And it'll also disallow us for other types, right? So you can't put a double there or anything. So if you want something that's variable length, you can have one of them, and it has to be at the end of your method. In general, right, this is a very nice way to make Java kind of automatically repackage your parameters and make your things more generic, right? Your method only needs to think about an array, and Java will take care of converting any calls to actually converting those parameters, right, those many parameters, right, into the single array one that your method knows how to use.